The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Digital Markets, Competition and Consumers Bill. Consideration of Lord's message.
Now.
I advise the House that Mr. Speaker has selected the manuscript amendment in the name of Sir Chris Bryant. Copies, I understand, are available in the vote office. We will begin with the government motion in relation to Lord's Amendment 104B. I call the Minister to move the motion, Mr. Kevin Hollinrake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this House disagrees with the Lord's Amendment 104B and the manuscript amendment and propose instead Government Amendments 104B, A and B. The Digital Markets, Competition and Consumers Bill will drive growth and deliver better outcomes for consumers across the UK. Both Houses have now reached agreement on digital markets measures relating to appeals, proportionality, the countervailing benefits exemption and guidance. However, we return to the House today as agreement remains outstanding on one issue relating to secondary ticketing. Lord's Amendment 104B, tabled by Lord Moynihan, would introduce additional regulatory requirements on resale sites. In our view, new regulation should only be considered if it is necessary, proportionate and future-proof, and should not duplicate existing rules. Simply adding new rules and regulations which add little to what is already there is not the answer to the problems of the secondary ticketing market. The first provision the Lords seek to add to the bill is to require secondary ticketing platforms to obtain proof of purchase of the ticket from the reseller before listing the ticket for resale. But it is already a criminal offence of unfair trading or fraud for a reseller to offer for sale products that cannot be legally sold.
Happy to give way. I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way and pay tribute for the work that he has done, and Lord Moynihan in the other place, who has been pursuing this doggedly with the government. My honourable friend rightly points out that additional regulations for the sake of additional regulations is not something that we would, as a government, that the government would want to support. However, can he tell me why does he believe that the CMA have prosecuted so few people under the current regulatory structure over recent years?
Okay, thank you for his points. And we do believe the problem is about enforcement, not about regulations. So the reason the CMA haven't prosecuted anybody is they don't have the responsibility or the rights to prosecute sellers on the ticketing sites. They have a jurisdiction over the platforms, but not the sellers. What we're doing here is giving them that opportunity, giving them those powers. So this will, we think, make a profound difference. Secondly, the amendment adds requirements that the face value and traders' details are clearly visible to the consumer. But likewise, existing legislation provides that traders must make this information clear and comprehensible. The amendment would also seek to prevent resellers from selling more tickets than can be legally purchased from the primary market. We agree with the principle, but believe that this is unenforceable. There are many sources on the primary market that sells tickets, each with their own ticket limit. I'm happy to... Where's the Honourable Lady?
I thank the Minister for giving way. This bill could have such a significant impact in tackling the issues associated with secondary ticket sites, reducing the instances of fraud and online scams. I don't understand why the Minister is so reluctant to commit to the recommendations made by the CMA. That's all that we want to see implemented through this amendment that was proposed by the Lords.
Well, the CMA report is different from the amendments proposed by the Lords. This is, we believe that Lord Moynihan's requirements in terms of things like face value and address of the trader are already covered. What we think is missing in this is the ability to enforce those regulations. We have seen prosecutions only recently, only a couple of months ago, with a 4-year sentence and a £6 million confiscation order. So we are seeing prosecutions from the national trading standards, but we believe the CMA will have a more profound effect in being able to tackle this particular issue. The Honourable Gentleman wants to give way as well.
similar to the Honourable Lady beside me, just to understand why the government don't get involved with this, because this, from what I read in the Lord's debate from Lord Moynihan, was exactly what happened for the Olympics in London in 2012. It's also what Ireland has done, is got rid of the secondary market because I thought it was very corrosive indeed. I also understand that frequently outside venues like the O2 there are fans in tears because they've bought wrong tickets in the secondary market. And particularly as the political wing of the Tartan Army came up with the Euros in the coming weeks, I wouldn't want to see fans of the very noble Tartan Army not being able to get to the game because of irregularities in the secondary market. And if this happens, will the Minister commit to come back and changing what the tack he's on just now?
Well, he raises some very important points, and alongside what we're doing in terms of giving the CMA more enforcement powers, which we think are needed, we're also committing to do a review of the primary and secondary market over the next 9 months to see what else can be done to make sure the secondary ticketing process is fairer for consumers. Happy to give away one more time if you'd like.
I'm very grateful. He has been generous, and that is appreciated. Has he looked at, or even spoken to perhaps equivalents in Ireland in and around this area, what they've done, why they've done it, and what the effects have been? Because I think it might be instructive.
Yes, we're aware of what's happening in Ireland, a complete prohibition on secondary ticketing sales. But our concern with that, of course, is the obvious, that it's just driven then underground into a black market, which is what we're seeing in Ireland. Indeed, some of the tickets in Ireland, in Dublin for Taylor Swift, are available on the internet at exactly the same price or similar prices to we're seeing in the UK. So we don't think that's a solution either. We're looking for a solution that's practical, that works across the piece. This would mean that a person could purchase multiple tickets from different sources on the primary market and resell them on a platform. This would make it nearly impossible for either the platform or an enforcer to calculate what the total limit of tickets should be. We must avoid the trap of thinking we are solving problems by simply adding words to legislation. We should not be tempted to devise legislation with no means of implementation. We believe the solution lies not in more regulations, but in regulation, or in other words, enforcement. Already this House has radically strengthened the CMA's enforcement powers through Part 3 of this bill. This strengthening applies to all consumer law, including on secondary ticketing. The CMA will have civil fining powers which could total 10% of the global turnover of firms breaking consumer law. New powers mean the CMA can process many more cases even quicker. But the Government is listening to the strength of feeling in both Houses on the issue of secondary ticketing. We have therefore tabled a Government amendment to further strengthen these enforcement powers. These amendments 104B, A and B will give the CMA those new powers. First, to enforce existing rules we have against unfair buying up of tickets with electronic bots, and second, to enforce existing rules on information that platforms and resellers must present to consumers. This is in addition to the Government's previous commitment to review the primary and secondary ticketing markets. That review will allow us to gain a deep understanding of how tickets flow from the primary market to the secondary market. The review will also include consideration of the timeliness and effectiveness of the information that must be provided to buyers and what reassurance is necessary for consumers to be confident that ticket offers are genuine. Taken together, the new enforcement powers for the CMA and the upcoming Government review represent a very clear strengthening of consumer protections. It will also help further steps can be taken. It will help ensure further steps can be taken in future in light of good practice recently emerging in the market.
But similar to the member from Richmond Park, I'm still stumped as to why the Government isn't here the champion of the consumer or the small person or the small man or the small family who faces the disappointment of the financial loss. I hear what he says about laws being enforced, and yes, that can apply to any law, but there's also a deterrent effect in laws. And I think the deterrent effect would be quite useful to have at this very point going forward.
Well, it makes a very point. I agree with the deterrent effect, but to me the deterrent effect is delivered through enforcement, through prosecutions, and this is making it easier to hit those platforms. In terms of the actual specific measures in the amendment. The things like the address is already required by the Consumer Contracts Regulations of 2013 in Schedule 2. The face value of a ticket is required in the Consumer Rights Act of 2015, Chapter 5, Clause 90, Subsection 3, Subsection C. So we think they're already covered within the current regulations. It's enforcement where we need to improve. In conclusion, I'm happy to give way.
I'm very grateful. Would the Minister agree with me that the selling on of tickets is something that has always happened and always will happen? And what's important is to reinforce existing safeguards rather than to make the secondary ticketing market unviable and push people into unregulated spaces where they get no protection at all, whereas at the moment they do get protection from most of the sites that sell tickets on the secondary market.
Absolutely, I agree with him on that point, and that is the concern, that you'll simply drive people into a black market, which seems to have happened in Ireland. I think the opposition's position that they will cap prices, again, the CMA said wouldn't reduce the incentives because of exactly the reason he points out. So what we're doing here is a pragmatic step to increase enforcement of current regulations, which we think is the right balance, whilst also looking at the wider picture to see if other improvements can be made through the review. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I encourage this House to agree with the Government's position on the outstanding Lords Amendment 104B and accept the Government's proposed amendments 104B, A and B. It is imperative that royal assent is achieved without further delay so that legislation can be implemented and the Bill's benefits realised as quickly as possible.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 104B, but proposes amendments A and B in lieu. I call Sir Chris Bryant to move his manuscript amendment.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do indeed beg to move the manuscript amendment in my name. And I confess that I'm completely perplexed by why the Government has adopted its attitude today. The bill could have gone through quite easily and be steaming ahead to royal assent if they had simply agreed to these very minor recommendations from the House of Lords. We do something very similar to what has been suggested in relation to Olympics tickets. That's partly because the Olympics insist on such legislation for any Olympics. But also, we do something very similar for sporting events. And so it's a legitimate question about why we don't do exactly the same for music, for comedy and other events. He's only just sat down, but now he's intervening on me.
To address one of the points he makes, he talks about the Olympics. There was a complete ban on resale. Is that what he's proposing?
No, if he just listens a few more minutes, then we'll get on to precisely what we're recommending. And indeed, I've said in the previous debates, if he has a memory of the last debate on this, I said very clearly, we're not intending to ban all resale. It's perfectly legitimate if somebody has a ticket that they have bought themselves, not through a bot, and they are then unable to use that ticket and they want to resell it. That should be a perfectly legitimate process, but it should be capped at a sensible, 10%, 15%, something like that above the original cost. Of course, I give way to my honourable friend.
Yes, I just want to help the Minister to correct the record, because with the Olympics legislation, we as a Parliament didn't ban resale. We said they had to only have authorised resale. So I just didn't want him to have that wrongly on the record.
I'm going to come on a little bit later to this issue about authorised resale, because I think it's a real problem in the market in the way that it operates at the moment, because fans are actually very, very unclear as to whether the ticket they have bought through the secondary market is actually authorised by the original vendor, i.e. the venue, or one of their authorised vendors, and therefore whether they will actually be admitted in the end. And that's one of the problems that we have here, which is that fans aren't certain, even when they're paying very inflated prices, that the ticket that they are buying is a genuine ticket and will gain them admittance to the events that they've paid for. Members have repeatedly over the years given evidence. If you just allow me to make a little bit of progress, I'm still on my first sentence. Members have repeatedly over the years given evidence that the secondary ticket market is not working. Tickets advertised with no declaration as to whether they are real tickets or the face value of the ticket. Websites that only declare the face value of a ticket at the very last stage, with a clock ticking away and the fan already hooked on the ticket. Fake tickets being sold, leaving consumers out of pocket and completely in the lurch. Tickets sold without evidence of proof of purchase or the seller's title to the tickets. Websites circumventing artists' and venues' policies on the resale of tickets. So, Taylor Swift tickets, face value £75, are presently selling on Viagogo for £6,840. If a Foo Fighters fan from the Rhondda wanted to buy a ticket for at the Cardiff Principality Stadium, it would have cost them £95 direct from the stadium. On Viagogo today, that exact same ticket would cost them £395. Or if a child from the Rhondda who loves space and hopes to one day become an aeronautical engineer wanted to see Tim Peake, The Quest to Explore Space at Swansea Arena, they would have paid £48.75 face value. On Viagogo, they would have to find £134. This is about much more than just price gauging and ripping people off from their hard-earned money. It's also robbing children of their chance to be inspired, to spark a creative idea, to see a career in our growing creative industries, or to learn from an expert. And that's why I wish the government were adopting the measure from the House of Lords. Fans, the people who really create the value, are being excluded from live concerts. And the UK's secondary ticketing market is estimated to be worth £1 billion annually, but it is rife with fraud and scamming, and it affects people every single day. I wouldn't even mind if just some of the inflated price money went actually into the creative industries and into training young people and providing them with a creative education, but not a single penny of it does. And it's set to get worse too. Ticketing security expert Reg Walker has reported a massive escalation of harvesting using software. People who have long used bots to bulk buy items like iPhones are now turning to ticket touting because it's more profitable. And there is a new generation of young tech-savvy armchair touts according to him, smashing the ticket systems to bits. It's a market that simply doesn't work, and Labour will fix it. The Lords have given us a perfectly sensible measure. It establishes a legal requirement that secondary ticketing facilities must not permit a trade or business to list tickets without evidence of proof of purchase or evidence of title, a matter not mentioned by the Minister. It forbids a reseller to sell more tickets to an event than they can legally purchase from the primary market. It requires that the face value of any ticket listed for resale and the trader or business's name and trading address are clearly visible in full on the first page on which a purchaser can view the ticket. I'll come on to the specifics of that because I've had a little bit of a debate with the Minister about this a little bit later. It also requires the Government to lay before Parliament the outcomes of a review of the above measures on the operation of the secondary ticketing market within 9 months of royal assent. I cannot understand why any sane person would oppose such a measure unless it was purely and simply for ideological reasons. But, of course, and I'm conscious of the honourable gentleman.
Just on ideological reasons, actually, the Conservative Party of all, the party who claims to be of Adam Smith, and if you read The Wealth of Nations, the behaviour of the rentier class is not exactly praised by Adam Smith. And this is pure rent-seeking. This is taking a ticket at £75, as the honourable gentleman said, charging 90 times that and doing nothing to add any value at all. This is rent-seeking and ideologically should be opposed by the party opposite.
He makes a very good point, and indeed, I mean, in the main, the market is a good thing. It can operate to produce good and efficient outcomes in society. But in this case, the market is not working, and where the market doesn't work, the state has to intervene. I cannot understand why any sane person should oppose such a measure, but unfortunately the government has. Its amendment in view is a weak sock puppet of a concession. It doesn't strengthen the rules, it simply leaves them in place. It doesn't prevent tickets being sold without evidence of proof of purchase or the seller's title to the tickets. It doesn't limit resale quantity of tickets to the original number limited by the seller or artist. It leaves in place the current system for showing the face value of a ticket, despite the fact that Section 90, brackets 8 of the Consumer Rights Act 2015 is, in my view, and in the view of everybody who has spoken to members about this, very opaque and open to interpretation, or I would argue, open to deliberate misinterpretation by the secondary ticketing market. So, for instance, on Viagogo, it doesn't say face value. It has a little box which says FV, which isn't explained anywhere on the website. So you have to click on that. If Viagogo genuinely wanted to be open and transparent, they would simply say face value and put the price there at the very beginning. StubHub, similarly, they are advertising tickets for Taylor Swift on the 21st of June. £711. It says nowhere on the first page that the face value. It says, I note, if you go onto the second page, that it's $75. I'm told that that is not the actual cost of the ticket. Thirdly, if you look at SeatsNet, they have tickets for Murrayfield, for Taylor Swift again, selling at £1,294.79p each, or £1,092.15p each, and nowhere does it say what the face value of the tickets is. Now, interestingly, AEG and AXS, who are the people who are managing the tickets from those concerts, the concerts at Murrayfield, say tickets are strictly not to be resold after initial purchase. Any tickets found to be purchased via resale on the non-official secondary market will not be valid for entry to Taylor Swift's concerts. In other words, it is completely in doubt whether these tickets that are being sold at £711 or £1,294 are actually tickets that will gain admittance for the individuals. Of course, I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Grateful to the Honourable Gentleman. He just referred to Viagogo. I've just gone onto the website. He referred to the FV symbol. When I click on the FV symbol, it tells me what the face value of the ticket was. Did I misunderstand the point he was making?
Yes, he did misunderstand the point that I was making. Why doesn't it just say face value instead of FV? It would be perfectly... And why, for that matter, why should you have to click the point of the Lord's Amendment? The point of the Lord's Amendment is very clear, that you should see from the very first time you see the ticket what the face value of that ticket is. Now, I'm perfectly happy if people want to be scammed, but they should be free to be scammed. But they should know, at least from the very first point that they seek to buy a ticket, what the face value of the ticket is. I will give way to the Honourable Gentleman, though I'm keen to move on.
I'm very grateful. I thought I'd intervene as he was struggling so much with the previous one, and I thought I'd give him a way out. Look, if the Honourable Gentleman gets his way, all that will happen is all of these tickets that are sold on the secondary market will be sold by spivs outside the location of the event. Why does the Honourable Gentleman think that consumers will be better protected by spivs selling these tickets outside the event than them being sold on official secondary ticket markets?
The secondary ticket market is the spivs. It's precisely the same set of people scamming the system, scamming the public, taking advantage of people's desire to get to tickets, and thereby making the market simply not work, either in the interests of the creators of the art, of the fans, or of the stadiums and the venues themselves. That's why we want to take action. And indeed, yes.
The member's quite right about the market not working. And the point that's been missed hugely on the other side is this is a finite amount of tickets that are going on sale. These finite amount of tickets are being gobbled up by the spivs, the speculators, whoever, online. He mentions the guys outside a venue. They can only hold so many tickets. It's the scale, as I heard from a sedentary position over here. It's the scale of it. This is being allowed on an industrial scale without the amendments that are being proposed. Why the government, why the Conservative Party is willing to see people ripped off is just unbelievable.
Well, I rather agree with the idea that clearly some members opposite actually want people to be ripped off, and maybe that's what we've seen for the last 14 years, when we've seen taxes rise, but what you get for those taxes diminish. Yet the government minister says that he wants to give more powers to the CMA to be able to enforce the action. The problem with that is that the CMA itself has given evidence that when it tried to take Viagogo to court, it came up against inherent weaknesses in the existing consumer protection toolkit, and the government isn't adding anything to that consumer protection toolkit whatsoever. Indeed, it's deliberately voting down precisely what it said. No, the minister will get to reply again afterwards, I'm sure. Oh, so he's begging. I'll give way to his begging.
I beg his leave. Thank you very much. Can I just draw his attention to the comments of the CMA before the Bill Committee? And they said exactly this in response to his point he just raised. We think many of the changes in the bill will address those weaknesses directly by giving us civil fining powers for the first time. That is not right to say that the CMA are getting no more ability to oversee this regime.
Well, no, you see, I read it completely differently from the way the Minister does. And if the Minister were right, why is it only at this stage that the Minister has chosen to bring forward this amendment? He's doing it precisely as with every single step of the way in relation to ticket touting that we've seen over the last 14 years. Somebody moves an amendment in the House of Lords, quite often Lord Moylan, wonderful man that he is, and then the government is dragged kicking and screaming to introduce sensible measures which have cross-party support, but the government objects to for some bizarre ideological reasons. Madam Deputy Speaker, Labour will strengthen the consumer rights legislation to protect fans from fraudulent ticket practices, restricting the resale of more tickets than permissible and ensuring anybody buying a ticket from the secondary market can see clearly and easily and readily and absolutely unambiguously what the original price for that ticket was and where it came from. All of this could have been done today if the government hadn't rejected the amendment but supported Labour and the cross-party amendment from the Lords. But they've put touts before fans and profits before the public. If Labour is given the chance to form a government, we will also go further. We will restrict the resale of tickets at more than a small set percentage over the price the original purchaser paid for it. No more touts buying a £50 ticket and selling it on for £500. No more bulk buying of seats at Taylor Swift concerts that could go to a 13-year-old fan from Wigan, but instead go to a millionaire from the US. And no more scalping of our creative industries and artists who set reasonable prices for their tickets, only to find somebody else making money off their talent and hard work by reselling them at 10 times the price. Ministers say that the CMA will enforce more. I doubt anything will change under anything the government is intending to do on this measure. I beg to move the amendment that stands in my name, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The original question was the government motion to disagree with the Lords in their Amendment 104B and to propose Amendments A and B in lieu. As on the notice paper, since when a manuscript amendment has been proposed, the question is that the manuscript amendment in the name of Sir Chris Bryant be made. SNP spokesman Richard Thomson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it's a pleasure to be able to speak in this debate, much as I wish we weren't here, because we wouldn't have needed to be here if the government had just done the decent thing and sensible thing and just accepted the amendments that were there in the Lords. Now, we've heard stories from interventions, from substantive contributions and in debates past about the effect of an under-regulated secondary market, which leaves fans paying over the odds for tickets. It places experiences beyond the financial reach of families. There's a high risk involved that the tickets that are purchased that way will not even grant entry to the events for which they're for. And I'd had hoped that by this stage the government might have read the room and understood that and decided to respond in a meaningful manner. Because let's not be in any doubt, Mr Deputy Speaker, the government amendment really does little other than add the Competitions and Markets Authority to the list of those bodies that are able to enforce the already existing and inadequate rules around secondary ticket sales. So certainly if just about everybody on this side of the House can see, even if the opposite side can't see, that the existing rules aren't working as well as they're intended to. Yes, I will.
He makes a good point about the powers being given to the CMA, and I wonder if the government has increased abilities, finance to the CMA, capacity to the CMA to deal with this sort of stuff, or is it just something that's been passed on in paper?
I wonder if the Minister might be able to deal with that remark, that question when he takes to his feet at the end. Certainly it might bring a bit more resource, but it will spread the resource for the CMA that little bit more thinly. So if we can see that the rules aren't working as effectively as they need to, and that is evidenced by previous debates where we've heard of the obscure charging practices, the pressures to pay with the countdown timers and the exorbitant end prices that very often result. So the government amendment is fine and as far as it goes. It might bring a little more resource to the problem, more of a strategic capability when tackling rule breakers. And the promise of the inquiry, I gave 2 cheers when the Minister announced that at the tail end of the last debate. But it's still not taking the practical measures which could be taken today in Amendment 104B, which would clean the marketplace up for secondary ticketing, which, let's recap, would involve measures such as a requirement to provide proof of purchase or evidence of title to the tickets that are for sale, which would forbid resellers from selling more tickets than they would legally have been able to purchase from the primary market, and ensuring that the face value and the end price being paid is clearly visible, along with the name and the trading address of those doing the secondary vending. It also, crucially, allows for secondary legislation to be introduced which could take account of anything that the inquiry that the Minister has announced. It could take account of that and then bring it in, and it compels the Secretary of State within 9 months to have concluded that work. So contrary to what the present Minister says, I do indeed believe that this is an Amendment 104B. The measures are proportionate and add clearly to the existing legislation. Now, for me, Lord's Amendment 104B, it's a bit like Lord's Amendment 104 before it. It's almost like the holy grail of amendments, because it's popular. It doesn't cost anything. And more to the point, it would be effective and it would do the right things in the right way for the right reasons. Now, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say that there's hardly any government in these Isles, whether it's Labour in Wales, the SNP in Scotland, the Conservatives, and at the UK level, which is so overwhelmed with public support and goodwill at this moment in time that it can afford to turn down good ideas when they're presented on a plate to them. So it's baffling, therefore, that the UK government would seek once again to steer these practical and effective measures off of the road and into the ditch. Now, I'll draw my remarks here to a conclusion, Mr Deputy Speaker, by remarking on the Dear Colleague letter that was sent from the Minister yesterday, where he expressed the clear desire to get this bill onto the statute book without delay. Now, I don't think there's a single person in this House looking at the totality of this bill would want to see that bill delayed. What we do want to see is for that bill to go forward into legislation in as strong a form as it can. And that, for me, clearly means going forward in a form which can tackle the egregious abuses of people's trust and the reasonable expectations they have when they participate in the secondary ticketing market. That's exactly what accepting this amendment would allow everyone to do, and I hope the Government takes heed of the very genuine strength of view that there is on this matter, not just within this House, not just within the other place, but outside amongst the population at large, and therefore allows this bill to progress this afternoon, amended accordingly. Thank you.
Much, Barbara Keeley.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I'm speaking in support of Lord's Amendment 104B, which seeks to safeguard fans from the fraudulent abuse which is rife in the secondary ticketing market. And like my colleague on the front bench, I'm really disappointed that the Government has repeatedly refused to accept amendments to this bill tabled by Lord Moynihan. And that, in fact, for many years before that, the Government has failed to act as advised by my honourable friend, the member for Washington and Sunderland West, and her colleagues on the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Ticket Abuse, supported by Fanfare Alliance. Now, the amendment we're discussing today includes the minimum of protection which I think fans deserve. This Lord's Amendment would ensure that anyone reselling a ticket has to show evidence that they have bought the ticket in the first place. This is a big issue, as we've been hearing in the secondary market, where ticket touts often list tickets which they do not own. The amendment also aims to stop touts from listing more tickets to an event than they can legally purchase from the primary market. If the Minister takes a look at Viagogo's listings for BBC Radio 1's upcoming big weekend, he will see that touts based in Germany are selling more than 10 times as many tickets as can legally be acquired. Now, the Minister says that it's unenforceable to do anything about that. That should just not be an excuse. We can't be standing here in this House and saying that a law that we could pass is unenforceable. It's ridiculous. Another important measure in this amendment is provision for a review to be published within 9 months of the bill passing. And that's an urgent issue, and the Government must be ambitious in acting to tackle it. I want to point out again to the Minister that action to crack down on ticket touting has significant support from the music industry and from fans. Regulating against exploitative secondary ticketing practices is part of the manifestos now put forward by music industry bodies, including live music industry venues and entertainment and UK music. Many promoters, artist managers, venues and musicians have been highly critical of the market as it currently operates and have called on the government for urgent action to tackle the problem. But of course, it's not just a problem for the music industry. It's foremost, and as we've already heard, it's an issue for fans. It's now commonplace for fans to miss out on getting tickets to sporting and cultural events, only to see those same tickets on sale on a secondary ticketing site for far more money than they can afford. With around a third of UK ticket buyers in the lowest socio-economic bands, these inflated prices are actually reinforcing inequalities. The price of a ticket can make a significant difference to social and cultural inclusion, in some cases enabling marginalised or disadvantaged groups the opportunity to access events. I think it's important that many venues and artists now endeavour to widen access to tickets by through ticket pricing to certain groups. But this approach is undermined when touts use software to restrict fans' access to the primary market and then force them onto resale sites like Viagogo, which charge prices at the top of what consumers can bear, as we've been hearing. For example, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I think this is disgraceful, I've been told that touts will buy up discounted tickets intended for young people, for people in wheelchairs, for carers and for others, and then sell them on at the going rate on the secondary market to increase their profit margins. This has a serious impact on those consumers who are then refused entry at the door, as well as impacting on the venue or artist which had subsidised tickets, and on the people for whom the lower price tickets had been intended and who can no longer afford to attend the show. Now, I've spoken about music so far, but touting also affects other live events such as sport. Most recently, we have seen Viagogo listing up to 100 tickets for the England versus Iceland friendly in Wembley on the 7th of June, despite the fact that listing football tickets is illegal on unauthorised platforms, including Viagogo's platform, for reasons of the safety of fans. When Guardian journalist Rob Davies highlighted the listings on social media, Viagogo took down the tickets straight away. Resale platforms should not be waiting to be caught out before complying with the law, but that's what we are seeing. Another example of a secondary resale site having to be pushed into acting by media coverage was a recent BBC Watchdog report, which raised concerns that some customers had not been able to receive a refund from Viagogo after being sent invalid tickets. Beth from Salisbury told the programme that she had booked a trip to Singapore to see her husband's favourite band Coldplay as a thank you to him for his unwavering support during her cancer treatment. The 2 tickets to the show were bought through Viagogo for £500, but when the tickets arrived, the piece of paper said, "This is not a valid ticket." When she tried to get a refund, she was refused, despite the fact that Viagogo have a guarantee, apparently. They in fact only refunded Beth's money for the faulty tickets after the report on the BBC Watchdog report. Given the weight of evidence of market dysfunction which we have heard here and has been heard in the other place, it's disappointing that the Minister is insisting, that the government is already doing enough. If that is the case, why not just include this amendment in the bill and see what comes out in the review? I give way to them.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady. It seems to me that she's making a very good argument for what the Minister said, which is making sure that there's better enforcement of existing regulations. That seems to be the thrust of what she was arguing for. That's what the government said that they're delivering.
I have to say that it's just not happening. I was going to go on to say, and I will go on to say, as we heard the last time we debated this a few weeks ago, just 6 people have been convicted of ticketing fraud, 4 of them in the past week. And the exploitative practices that I've talked about and that my honourable friend on the front bench has talked about continue to be rife on resale platforms. The Minister has got to accept that this really derisory record cannot continue. It's dismal. Labour has committed to a range of strong measures to crack down on ticket touts and fix this broken system for fans. So I say to the Minister, will the government start to accept the weight of evidence and do the same?
Hodgson.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'm thrilled to be following my honourable friend who is doing so much work on this matter in the last few years, especially since she took on this brief and made an excellent speech. I have to say at the start, Mr Deputy Speaker, here we are again. And I see also today we've been joined by the Honourable Member for Shipley, who back in 2011, I was going to say did the terrible thing. He might not think it was terrible, but of course I do. The terrible thing I'm referring to is when he talked out my private member's bill in 2011, the sale of tickets, cultural and sporting events bill, which if that bill had been passed and had become an act, we wouldn't be here today because we would have already fixed this broken market well over a decade ago. So I welcome him to his place today. I know he likes to keep an eye on his handiwork. I will.
Indeed, it's a great shame the Honourable Lady wasn't listened to 13 years ago. But I've got a feeling that probably after the Euros and with political microscope on this issue now, we may be back here an awful lot sooner than we think, unfortunately.
Sadly, if Amendment 104B is not accepted today, that might indeed be the case. So I welcome the opportunity to speak in this debate today, as short as it might be. As I'm sure the Minister is aware, I'm here in my capacity as Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Ticket Abuse that has done some great work in this area. Will be supporting the Opposition's manuscript amendment to the Government's motion and therefore supporting the revised Lords Amendment 104B as it relates to the secondary ticketing market. I want to start, as others have done, by thanking the excellent Lord Moynihan for his continued efforts as co-chair of the Ticket Abuse All-Party Group to regulate black market resale sites such as Viagogo. He is, of course, right to do so, and I commend his tenacity and brilliant work over many years. While I was in full support of the original Amendment 104, I warmly welcome his difficult decision to reintroduce this amendment with some notable changes. The Government's decision to reject the original amendment was initially given, as I quote, because protections for consumers in relation to secondary ticketing are adequately provided for under existing legislation, end quote. However, despite uncontrolled touting taking place on an industrial scale, with the tickets resold through sites such as Viagogo, there has not been a single prosecution under the Breaching of Ticket Limits Regulations 2018, no convictions for using bots under the Digital Economy Act 2017, and only 2 major tout prosecutions with 6 individual convictions since 2017. So I can hardly see how they can describe current legislation as adequate. I'll give way. And then
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady again. She mentioned Lord Moynihan, and I think for context it should be remembered that Lord Moynihan was a sports minister in Margaret Thatcher's government. Now, to imagine that he is anti-market, as the charge has been made over there for anybody who supports his bill, a Thatcher minister's bill, I mean, the world has gone topsy-turvy, or the Tory party have gone so far to the right they've lost themselves.
The Honourable Gentleman makes exactly the correct point. Lord Moynihan is a highly respected minister, and he's hardly a lefty or whatever it is that people call people like me. While I welcome the Government's somewhat muted attempts to enforce existing law with their amendments in lieu, fans are crying out for more concrete action. Common Sense Amendment 104B seems timely, with the so-called Ticket Queen being sentenced just last week to 4 years behind bars. Again, with just 2 cases prosecuted over 6 years, with only 6 convictions and 0 budget for more, this latest prosecution is not a success of the current regulations, but a damning indictment of their inadequacy. Viagogo claim that bad actors, such as Ticket Queen, go against all we stand for, and that's a direct Viagogo quote. Yet whilst British music lovers were conned and defrauded by these crooks, they are crooks because they're now in jail, Viagogo and other secondary websites are likely to have made millions of pounds in service fees from these transactions, from their transactions. Perhaps as much as £4 million from my calculations. And that's only for one group of touts who were permitted to list tens of thousands of tickets, no questions asked. I fear this dirty money is now being used to fuel a huge lobbying and PR campaign that we are all seeing. That appears, I have to say, to have worked on some government ministers and some advisers. When they champion Viagogo's rip-off business model at the dispatch box, they are regurgitating at length their bogus evidence and unsubstantiated claims about the impacts of our current pro-consumer legislation, which, as I've already said, is just not adequate. From the few convicted touts alone, the secondary ticketing market is receiving potentially tens of millions of pounds in, it has to be said, the proceeds of crime. Viagogo's boss, who was no-showed multiple times at parliamentary inquiries, declined to answer whether Viagogo may have benefited, inadvertently or not, from the proceeds of these crimes, when he was asked in an interview just recently by The Guardian's Rob Davis. Had Amendment 104 with its 5 uncontroversial measures been in place at the time, it is unlikely that these crimes would have been committed in the first place. 3 things would have occurred. 1, the touts would have only been able to resell the same numbers of tickets they could buy in the primary market. 2, the secondary platform operators, Viagogo and Ticketmaster, would have needed to check the receipts of those tickets. And 3, ticket buyers would have been provided with far clearer information about who they were buying from and would have likely reconsidered. The past weekend, I was also made aware from the article in The Guardian, again by Rob Davies, that my honourable friend referred to also, that Viagogo was listing 100 seats at Wembley for England's 7th of June friendly against Iceland. And I remind this House that the resale of football tickets without permission from clubs or football governing bodies has been illegal in England and Wales since 1994. Viagogo have been asked how many football tickets they have sold over the years, not just on the recent, they called it human error, that they'd been listed. Not just then, but how many they've sold over the years, how much they have made from such sales, and if they will donate that income to grassroots football charities. Their answer, Mr Deputy Speaker? Silence. The government must be under no illusions. This is a thriving online black market, scamming hard-working families. With the cost of living crisis ongoing, it's heartbreaking to see live events added to the pile of small luxuries being taken away by parasitic touts and government inaction. I know fans will be gathering in a few weeks' time for Taylor Swift's first UK performance. I don't know if any colleagues in the House are going to see Taylor Swift, but first concert's on the 7th of June, you are in Edinburgh. I've already heard of single seats with average to poor views going on sale for up to £600 on secondary websites, many times face value, and seats next to each other of upwards of £1,000 each. While this will be an amazing night for many, I'm sure the Minister will enjoy it with his family and all the nights that follow. I have heard from industry specialists that they expect dozens of fans at each gig, maybe more, to be heartbroken when they are turned away with invalid tickets, bought off sites such as Viagogo. Many venues have now had to set up special services to deal with these victims of fake or invalid tickets bought online, because they know it's going to happen. Lots of fans would have already shelled out hundreds of pounds for travel and accommodation, and some may not even receive a refund for their ticket, despite Viagogo's so-called guarantee. This was the focus of the BBC One show's Watchdog segment recently, which I shared with the Minister just last week. I hope he had time to watch it. It's still not too late to fix this broken market. I implore the Government to support revised Amendment 104B. The Minister could change his mind when he gets to his feet. Additionally, despite the overwhelming evidence and the already damning findings of the excellent independent review by Professor Michael Waterston in 2016, and that was following the Consumer Rights Act in 2015, Amendment 104B endorses yet another review of the secondary ticketing market, as the Government previously called for, while maintaining some of the problems that Amendment 104 would have fixed. I'll give way one last time because we're coming to the...
Very generous. She absolutely touches on the scale of this, and was mentioned earlier about touts outside the venue. The fact that the scale of this and the industrial scale of this means that families are thinking they're buying something, committing to travel, committing to spend, committing to hotels, and that is what's wrong. Now, if that happens again, the government should be facing these families and explaining why that has happened.
That is a very good point, and as much as none of us want to see any of those unhappy, devastated fans at any of these venues, we are probably going to have to face the images of that, the emails from those fans in our inboxes and on our TV screens and maybe on the front pages of newspapers. So we have to be prepared for that, and I'm sure the Government Minister would be sad to see that. If the Government is truly committed to another review, I know that Lord Moynihan, a highly respected Conservative Lord, as we've heard, former Minister, has already been recommended to them as a possible chair for the next review. This would be very fair and pragmatic. I hope the gentleman from Shipley is agreeing with me. I hope he is. I think it would be a very fair and pragmatic selection of chair, and one which I would wholeheartedly support. I conclude, on 2 occasions the Lords have listened to evidence and the stated views of the CMA, and they've voted through these amendments. Ministers, however, seem hell-bent, I have to say, on ignoring the views of the other place. The Lords have sent a clear message to the Government to look at the facts and think again. I ask the Minister once again, will he finally side with fans, artists and athletes, support Amendment 104B today, and not let this be another wasted opportunity by the Conservative Government? And as I said in our last debate on this matter, either start putting fans first or step aside so we can.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And with the leave of the House, I'll address the points raised by honourable members in this debate. The Shadow Minister presents his solution to this problem as being a cap on ticket prices, yet that flies in the face of the evidence given by the CMA in their report on this particular issue, which they were very clear. It said that measure would not significantly diminish the incentives, therefore the misconduct would continue. It's good to hear him having said that finally admit that the market is a good thing. I think it's a revelation in terms of the opposition saying such a thing. But certainly the common factor between him and the other contributors in this debate, all the points he raises, things like the face value, for example, he doesn't see it sufficiently clear on the various different secondary sites, despite the fact it seems to me very clear there is FV and a key on the and a clear key saying what face value is on the first page on the Viagogo website, the first page on terms of StubHub. But all those points relate to one thing and one thing only, because the requirements are there within the existing legislation, is about enforcement. We are keen to bolster enforcement. And he says we are somehow kicking and screaming to do so with this amendment, despite the fact that unilaterally this government has brought forward this legislation, Part 3 particularly, which offers the CMA huge new powers. That was not through an amendment in the Commons or the Lords. This was something that was on the face of the bill from day one. I'll give it away to him very briefly and conclude.
Very grateful. He knows that Taylor Swift tickets are being sold. The organiser of those concerts has said that tickets that are sold on unauthorised secondary ticket markets are not valid. Would he encourage people, therefore, only to buy from the authorised ticket vendors and not unauthorised, which includes Viagogo?
Well, I would certainly advise any consumer to comply with the rules as set out by a primary market. If the primary market has said that, and it's quite clear that the primary markets can do a lot more in terms of restricting secondary sales, and that's something that's available. We've been quoted examples of it today, the way the Olympics was run, the way football matches are run, the way Glastonbury is run. All those things have very tight controls on secondary markets, which is within the gift of the primary market. The honourable gentleman, the member for Gordon, asked about resources vicariously with the other honourable gentleman, and £122 million a year is CMA's budget, so we feel it has the resources available to it, and fines and penalties under this particular amendment can be kept by the CMA for its enforcement activities. In terms of the Honourable Lady for Worsley and Eccles and the Honourable Lady for Washington, both who refer to similar points, all their points, I think, talking about things inappropriate resale of tickets for England football, for example, or refunds that have not been processed properly. In terms of the 6 people that have been prosecuted, only 6 people, we want to see more people prosecuted for abuse in this particular sector. In terms of the Honourable Lady, in terms of bots, the fact that prosecutions haven't been brought forward under bots, absolutely, and this amendment allows the CMA to do that. All this concrete action that she calls for, is about enforcement, not about more regulations. I absolutely agree with that, and we want to make sure there is more enforcement in this space. So if I can conclude, Mr Deputy Speaker, it is of paramount importance that we get this bill onto the statute book so it can start delivering for businesses and consumers as soon as possible. I'd like to thank all who have helped to get to this place, including the clerks, officials in the department and the bill team, for their hard work on this legislation, and I hope all members will feel able to support our position, and I beg to move.
The question is that the manuscript amendment in the name of Sir Chris Bryant be made. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Division. Clear the lobbies. Order. The question is that the manuscript amendment in the name of Sir Chris Bryant be made. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Tell us for the ayes, Mary Glindon, Tonia Antoniazzi. Tell us for the noes, Joy Morrissey, Mark Jenkinson. Order. Order.
The ayes to the right, 217. The noes to the left, 268.
Thank you. The ayes to the right, 217. The noes to the left, 268. So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock. The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 104B and proposes Amendments A and B in lieu as on the order paper. May that opinion say aye? Aye! 3 no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.